Welcome to our deep dive into social intelligence. We're going to be dissecting excerpts from Daniel Goleman's book, Social Intelligence.
Okay.
And trust me, it's not your typical people skills manual.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Goleman takes us way beyond,
Right.
just kind of the surface level stuff and reveals that, a huge part of our social intelligence operates on a level that we're not even aware of.
It's like we're about to uncover some kind of hidden social superpower.
Yeah. Right.
Most of us think, social intelligence is all about, being charming and witty and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
Goleman is suggesting there's a whole other dimension
Right.
at play here.
Yeah, he calls it the low road of social intelligence.
Oh, road. Okay.
And it's all about these unconscious automatic processes that traditional measures completely miss.
Okay, so let's unpack this low road a bit.
Okay.
Can you give me an example of
Sure.
how it works in real life?
Yeah, so think about those times where you just click with someone effortlessly.
Uh-huh.
Right, there's this natural synchrony.
Yeah.
This nonverbal dance of smiles and nods and mirrored body language. That's the low road in action.
Got it.
It's kind of orchestrating these subtle interactions without us even realizing it.
Wow, so it's like our brains are kind of syncing up
Yeah.
in the background, creating this seamless flow to the
Yeah,
conversation.
Totally.
What happens when that synchrony is missing?
Yeah, well, Goleman uses the term dysthemia to describe a deficit in these low-road skills. And you can imagine, missing those subtle cues in a job interview.
Right.
You could have the perfect resume, but if your nonverbals are off, it could cost you the opportunity.
That's such a good point. It makes these seemingly small interactions like incredibly high stakes.
Totally.
Right. Does this dysthemia primarily affect children, or can adults struggle with it too?
It can definitely impact adults as well.
Oh, yeah.
And it can lead to things like social isolation and difficulty forming lasting relationships.
Oh, wow.
It's like you're missing this crucial piece of the social puzzle.
Yeah, you're missing a whole language.
Right.
Right. It makes you realize how much we take these low-road skills for granted.
Yeah.
And speaking of taking things for granted, we often associate social intelligence with charisma.
Yeah.
Right? So how does that tie into this whole low-road concept?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
So Goleman talks about how charisma operates in part through this low-road synchrony.
Okay.
He even gives the example of Ronald Reagan, who planned a seemingly spontaneous outburst during a debate to make a strong impression.
Okay, so like those magnetic entertainers who can just captivate a whole audience. Are you saying they're kind of masters of manipulating this low-road synchrony?
Totally. They become these centers of emotional contagion. They draw people in and make them feel what they feel.
But as with anything, there's a balance, right?
Right. Yeah, Goleman mentions this college student who was incredibly expressive, well-liked by his peers, but really struggled in formal settings where a little more restraint was needed.
Yeah, that's interesting because it suggests that social intelligence isn't just about being on all the time.
Exactly.
Right. It's about reading the room, adjusting your approach based on the context. You need to know when to dial up the charisma and when to hold back.
Absolutely. It's about adaptability and being aware of those subtle dynamics at play in any social situation.
Okay.
And that brings us to another crucial aspect of social intelligence that's often overlooked.
Okay, I'm ready for another layer of this social intelligence onion.
Okay.
What else do we need to consider?
Well, Goleman emphasizes that true social intelligence goes beyond just self-presentation and charisma.
Okay.
It requires genuine concern for others.
So it's not just about being smooth and charming, but actually caring about the people you're interacting with.
Right.
How does that concern factor manifest itself in our everyday lives?
Yeah. Goleman shares this powerful story about seminary students rushing to give a sermon. And on their way, they encounter a man who appears to be injured and in need of help.
Okay.
And some of the students stop to help while others fixated on, giving their sermon just rush by.
Oh, wow.
And this really illustrates how concern motivates action. It's empathy translated into tangible assistance.
That's such a powerful example.
Yeah.
It highlights the difference between just feeling empathy and actually being moved to act on it. So is this where concepts like passion and altruism?
Yeah, and Goleman connects the sense of concern to research on things like charitable giving and what he calls organizational citizenship. Those people who go above and beyond to help their colleagues. He even gives the example of Bill and Melinda Gates, who leverage both their business acumen and deep empathy to tackle global health issues.
That's a great illustration of how high road and low road skills can work in tandem. You need the strategic thinking and the genuine compassion to create real meaningful change.
Totally.
But here's a question that's been nagging at me.
Okay.
If these low road skills are so unconscious and automatic, can we actually train them?
That's a great question.
Can we become more socially intelligent, even if we weren't born with that natural gift?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
So Goleman argues that even these seemingly instinctual low-road abilities can be honed and developed. And he points to Paul Ekman's work on teaching people to detect micro-expressions.
Micro-expressions.
These are those fleeting facial expressions that can reveal a person's true emotions.
So you're telling me we can learn to read people's minds, basically?
Well, not quite mind reading, but it's close.
Okay.
So these micro-expressions flash across a person's face in a fraction of a second, often betraying an emotion they're trying to conceal. And Ekman's research shows that with practice, people can become incredibly skilled at spotting them.
Wow.
And here's the amazing part. This training actually bypasses conscious thought. It feeds information directly to the low road.
That's incredible. It's like we're hacking our own social operating system.
Totally.
So if we can train ourselves to become more attuned to these subtle cues, what else could we unlock? It makes you wonder about the untapped potential of our social brains. But before we get too carried away with our newfound social superpowers, I think it's time to address the flip side. Of social intelligence. Those who use it for less than noble purposes.
You're talking about the dark side of social intelligence?
Yeah.
Goleman delves into the dark triad of personality types. Narcissists, Machiavellians, and psychopaths.
Oh, boy.
These individuals often possess a high degree of social intelligence, but they lack empathy and concern, and they use their skills for personal gain.
This is where things start to get a little creepy. Can you break down these dark triad types for me?
Sure.
Who are these people, and how do they weaponize their social intelligence?
Well, Goleman provides these vivid descriptions of each type. He describes the narcissist as someone like a flashy, self-absorbed football player. You know, only shining when the spotlight's on him. Then there's the Machiavellian, the classic kiss-up, kick-down type, who manipulates others to climb the ladder. And then lastly, the psychopath, devoid of empathy, driven purely by self-interest. Goleman even quotes this chilling statement from a serial killer who said that he had to turn off empathy to commit his crimes.
That is truly chilling. It's hard to fathom having that level of social awareness, yet being completely devoid of compassion.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if their brains are wired differently.
Are they missing some fundamental human element?
Well, there's definitely evidence suggesting neural differences. For example, psychopaths show very minimal activity in the amygdala, which is the brain's fear center. And this may explain their ability to stay calm under pressure and their lack of remorse for their actions. They just don't experience emotions the way most people do.
That's both fascinating and terrifying. It's like they're missing a core part of the human experience. But what about the opposite end of the spectrum? What about those who struggle to understand social cues altogether?
So that leads us to the concept of mind blindness.
Mind blindness.
Which Goleman explores through the lens of autism and Asperger's syndrome. These individuals face a tremendous challenge understanding other people's thoughts and feelings.
So unlike the dark triad, it's not about malicious intent. It's a genuine struggle to grasp the nuances of the social world. I mean, it must feel incredibly isolating. To be so disconnected.
Goleman shares the story of Richard Borchards. who's this brilliant mathematician with Asperger's,
Okay.
who finds social situations completely perplexing. Small talk phone calls, humor, sarcasm.
Yeah.
They're all baffling to him.
I remember Goleman mentioning this cartoon called Mean Monkey.
Oh, yeah.
How does that illustrate mind blindness?
It's a great example.
Okay.
So the cartoon shows this boy who can see an alien that his father can't see.
Right.
And to understand the humor, you need to hold both the boy's perspective and the father's perspective in mind.
Right.
You know, you have to grasp that the boy knows something the father doesn't.
Yeah.
And for most of us, that's completely intuitive.
Right.
But for someone with mind blindness, that presents this major obstacle.
It really highlights how much of our social interaction relies on this unspoken understanding of what's going on in other people's minds.
Yeah.
Right? Are there any physiological differences in the brains of people with mind blindness?
Well, research has revealed some interesting findings.
Yeah.
Brain scans of individuals with autism often show less activity in the fusiform gyrus, which is the area responsible for recognizing faces.
So their brains aren't processing social information
That's right.
in the same way.
They often avoid eye contact, which further limits their opportunities for social learning and development of empathy.
This deep dive has been such an eye-opener. We've gone from unconscious synchrony to the dark triad to the challenges of mind blindness.
Yeah.
It's amazing how intricate and nuanced social intelligence truly is.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this part of our exploration, I'm curious about the role of genetics.
Okay.
Is social intelligence something we're born with? Or does our environment play a role? Is it nature or nurture?
Well, that's where the classic nature versus nurture debate comes in.
Right.
But Goleman argues it's not an either-or situation.
Okay.
Our genes are designed to interact with our environment, including our social experiences.
So you're saying that our social interactions can actually influence how our genes express themselves?
It's a relatively new field called social epigenetics.
Wow, social epigenetics?
Yeah, and Goleman cites these studies with mice, where the amount of licking and grooming a mother rat provides actually affects her pup's brain development. More nurturing mothers raise more resilient and socially adept offspring.
That's mind-blowing.
Right.
So even in mice, parental care has this direct impact on brain development and social behavior.
And it makes you wonder, you know.
Do we see similar patterns in humans?
There's compelling evidence to suggest. So one study focused on adopted children
who were born into families with a history of violence, but raised in peaceful homes. And these children were significantly less likely to exhibit antisocial traits.
So it suggests that a nurturing environment can override even a genetic predisposition after regression.
It's incredible to think about how intertwined.
It really is. It seems like social intelligence is this intricate tapestry woven from both our innate predispositions and the social world we inhabit.
Totally.
We come into the world with certain tendencies.
Right.
But our environment, especially our early childhood experiences, can profoundly shape how those tendencies manifest.
That's a fantastic way to put it.
Right.
We're only beginning to unravel this complex dance between nature and nurture, but it's becoming increasingly clear that our social world plays a critical role in shaping who we become.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we just scratched the surface of how our early experiences and environment kind of intertwine with our genes to shape our social intelligence. But let's dive deeper into the profound impact of those formative years.
Yeah, absolutely. Today we're going to focus on the concept of attachment.
Okay.
And this is really where the blueprint for our social and emotional lives is created. It impacts our relationships, our well-being, even how our brains develop.
This is a topic I find endlessly fascinating.
Yeah.
So much of who we are as adults seems to stem from those early years. But the science behind it has always felt a bit mysterious to me.
It is fascinating. Goleman tells this really poignant story of a suicidal patient whose struggles could actually be traced all the way back to a childhood that was just starved of empathy and responsiveness. And it's a stark reminder of how deeply early neglect can wound us.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It makes you realize just how vital it is for children to feel seen and understood, to have their needs met consistently and with genuine care.
Yeah.
So how does the idea of attachment fit into all of this?
Well, attachment theory, which was developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, proposes that infants have this innate drive to form these strong emotional bonds with their caregivers. And these bonds become a source of security, allowing children to explore the world confidently, knowing that they have this safe haven to return to when needed.
It's like having a secure base from which to venture out and explore. What happens when those early attachments are disrupted or insecure? What are the implications for these children as they grow?
Well, that's where things get a little more complicated. So Goleman explains that different attachment styles emerge based on how caregivers respond to a child's needs.
Got it.
He describes how attuned those who are sensitive and responsive to their baby's cues, fosters secure attachment. And these children grow up feeling confident in relationships, secure in knowing that they can rely on others.
That does sound like the ideal scenario.
Yeah.
But what about children whose needs aren't consistently met or whose caregivers are emotionally unavailable? What happens in those cases?
Well, Goleman outlines two main types of insecure attachment, avoidant and anxious. Avoidant attachment develops when caregivers are consistently emotionally distant or dismissive of their child's needs. And these children learn to suppress their emotions, and they become fiercely self-reliant. Often avoiding intimacy in their adult relationships.
It's as if they've learned that relying on others just leads to disappointment, So they build up these walls to protect themselves. What about anxious attachment? How does that manifest?
Well, anxious attachment arises from inconsistent or unpredictable caregiving. The child never knows for sure whether their needs will be met. So they become clingy and insecure, constantly seeking reassurance and validation.
So they're hyper-aware of any hint of rejection or abandonment, always on edge about the stability of their relationships. It's fascinating and honestly a bit sad to see how these early patterns can echo throughout our adult lives.
It is quite profound. And these patterns extend beyond just romantic relationships. They influence our interactions with friends, colleagues, even authority figures.
If someone had a difficult childhood and developed an insecure attachment style, are they doomed to a life of troubled relationships? Or is there any hope for breaking free?
That's a great question.
From these patterns?
The good news is that attachment styles aren't set in stone. While early experiences definitely exert a powerful influence, we're not simply prisoners of our past. With awareness and effort, we can learn to recognize our patterns and cultivate healthier ways of relating.
So therapy could be helpful. Or even just being in a secure, supportive relationship later in life. Can those experiences actually reshape these ingrained patterns?
They can. Goleman highlights the importance of what he calls reparative relationships. Where we finally experience that attunement and responsiveness that was missing in our early years. And this could be with a therapist, a romantic partner, a close friend, even a mentor. The key is to have experiences that challenge those old insecure patterns and help us forge new neural pathways.
It's like giving our brains a chance to rewire themselves, to learn that connection can be safe and dependable. It's incredible to think that our relationships can actually change the physical structure of our brains.
It truly is remarkable. And this concept extends beyond just attachment. Goleman explores the intriguing link between our social connections and our happiness set point.
Wait, our happiness set point?
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that before.
What
does it mean?
It refers to the idea that we each have this baseline level of happiness that we tend to return to even after major life events. You can think of it like a thermostat for our mood. Some people naturally have a higher set point, while others are more prone to those dips in happiness.
So you're saying that even if something amazing happens, like you win the lottery, our happiness levels will eventually settle back down to their baseline.
Precisely what research has shown.
It seems almost counterintuitive.
Right,
like,
yeah.
you should be happy forever.
And the same goes for negative events.
Oh, wow.
The initial impact might be devastating, but most people will eventually bounce back to roughly their previous level of happiness.
That's both encouraging and a bit disheartening at the same time.
Right.
Like, it begs the question, what determines our happiness set point?
Okay.
Is it purely genetic, or do our experiences play a role?
Well, Goleman points to research by Richard Davidson, who is a leading figure in affective neuroscience, who suggests that our happiness set point is influenced by both our genes and our experiences, particularly those in early childhood.
I'm sensing a recurring theme here.
Yeah.
Those early years are incredibly influential
They are.
in shaping who we become.
Right.
But how exactly does childhood affect our happiness later in life?
Okay.
What are the mechanisms at play?
Well, Davidson found this connection between early nurturing and a more joyful brain pattern. Children who experience consistent love care responsiveness tend to develop more resilient brains. Better equipped to bounce back from setbacks.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If you grow up in a secure, loving environment, you internalize this belief that the world is generally a good place.
Yeah.
And that you have the strength to face challenges.
And those early experiences actually shape neural circuitry. Why? Particularly in the prefrontal cortex, which plays this crucial role in regulating our emotions.
So nurturing caregiving actually contributes to building a more resilient brain.
Precisely.
One that's better able to navigate the ups and downs of life.
And this resilience is a key ingredient for happiness because it allows us to weather those setbacks and disappointments without becoming totally overwhelmed by negative emotions.
Though it's not about avoiding stress altogether.
Right.
Which is impossible anyway.
Yeah, you can't avoid stress.
But about learning to cope with it effectively. It's about developing those emotional regulation skills.
You've hit the nail on the head. Goleman even criticizes parents who try to shield their children from any and all discomfort. He uses the example of this wealthy couple who never allow their daughter to have play dates for fear of her getting upset.
That seems so counterproductive.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to create this bubble-wrapped world for her.
Right.
But in doing so, they're depriving her
of
the very experiences she needs to develop resilience and emotional intelligence.
Children need to experience a full spectrum of emotions, including the negative ones, in order to learn how to manage them effectively. And this learning happens through interaction, through those moments of rupture and repair we discussed earlier.
So a child having a meltdown is actually an opportunity for them to learn how to self-soothe and regulate their emotions.
Yeah, as long as they have.
Provided they have the right support.
That's the key. The caregiver's response is crucial. Goleman emphasizes attuned parenting, where the parent remains calm and supportive, helping the child process their emotions without getting overwhelmed themselves.
It sounds like such a delicate balancing act.
It is.
You need to acknowledge and validate the child's feelings without getting swept up in the emotional storm yourself.
It is this intricate dance. It's about co-regulating emotions, helping the child find a sense of calm and safety, even amidst all those intense feelings. And this repeated experience of co-regulation strengthens those neural pathways, leading to a more resilient and emotionally intelligent brain.
I'm noticing a pattern here. The significance of those early interactions. The interplay of synchrony, rupture, and repair. The development of secure attachment and resilience. It's all interconnected, isn't it?
Absolutely. These early experiences really form the bedrock of our social and emotional well-being throughout life. They shape how we perceive ourselves, how we relate to others, how we handle stress, even our capacity for happiness.
This deep dive is truly shifting my perspective on social intelligence. It's not just about surface-level charm or knowing the right social cues. It's about these profound emotional patterns rooted in our early experiences and even our biology.
You've captured the essence of it. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore how these patterns play out in adult relationships and uncover some fascinating insights into empathy and the power of human connection.
We've explored the intricate foundations of social intelligence, like tracing its roots back to those early childhood experiences and the fascinating interplay of nature and nurture. But now I'm curious to see how these patterns manifest in our adult relationships.
Well, it's remarkable how those early blueprints continue to shape our social interactions throughout life.
Yeah.
So today, let's delve into one of the most crucial elements of social intelligence.
Okay.
Empathy.
Empathy.
It's often hailed as this cornerstone of human connection.
Right.
But Goleman reveals that there's more to it than meets the eye.
Okay, I'm all ears. I've always thought of empathy as this positive force.
Yeah.
But you're suggesting there might be some nuances or even potential downside.
That's right. Goleman actually distinguishes between different types of empathy.
Okay.
There's primal empathy, which is that immediate visceral response we have to someone else's emotions. Think about a baby crying when they hear another baby cry. It's almost instinctual.
Right.
Reflex.
Yeah, it's like those mirror neurons firing.
Right.
Creating this instant sense of shared feeling.
Yeah.
But I'm sensing there's more to the empathy story than just this gut-level reaction.
Absolutely. Goleman also describes what he calls cognitive empathy.
Okay, cognitive empathy.
And this is the ability to understand another person's perspective, their thoughts and feelings, even if we don't necessarily share those feelings ourselves.
So it's like stepping into someone else's shoes, seeing the world through their eyes.
Exactly.
Even if our experiences are completely different.
Yeah.
That seems crucial for navigating complex social situations.
This type of empathy is essential for things like negotiation, conflict resolution, and building those strong, healthy relationships.
Yeah, I could see how understanding where someone's coming from, why they might be reacting in a certain way, would make it much easier to find common ground and build trust.
Exactly. And then Goleman introduces a third type of empathy that he calls empathic concern.
Empathic concern.
And this goes beyond simply understanding or sharing someone's feelings.
Okay.
It's about feeling this genuine sense of care and compassion. This motivation to actually help or support them.
So it's empathy in action.
Right.
It reminds me of that story about the seminary students encountering a man in need. Those who stopped to help clearly demonstrated.
Yeah. That's a perfect example.
Empathic concern.
And what's interesting is that Goleman points out that even those who are highly skilled in cognitive empathy can lack this empathic concern. Think back to the dark Triad personalities we discussed earlier.
Oh, wow. That's a good point. They're often very adept at reading people and understanding their motivations. But they use that knowledge for manipulative purposes.
Exactly.
There's no real care for the other person's well-being.
It raises the question, can empathy be a double-edged sword?
It's a chilling thought that someone could be so attuned to human emotions, yet so lacking in compassion. Could having too much empathy actually be detrimental in some cases?
Well, Goleman doesn't shy away from addressing the potential pitfalls of empathy. He talks about how too much empathy, especially for those in helping professions, can lead to burnout. Constantly absorbing the pain and suffering of others can really take a toll.
Yeah, it's like emotional overload. I can imagine that feeling of being overwhelmed by the weight of other people's emotions.
Precisely. And Goleman also warns against something he calls empathic bias.
Empathic bias.
Which is this tendency to favor those we feel empathy for, even if it means overlooking their faults or acting unfairly towards others.
That's fascinating. So even empathy, a trait that we generally view as positive, can have unintended consequences if we're not careful.
It seems like balance is crucial, as with most things in life.
This conversation is really reshaping my understanding of empathy. It's not just a simple emotion. It's a complex skill set that requires ongoing development and refinement.
I think that's a key takeaway. Empathy is such a valuable skill to cultivate, not only for the sake of our relationships, but for our own well-being. Research shows that empathetic individuals tend to be happier, healthier, and even more successful in life.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. When we connect with others on a deeper level, when we feel seen and understood, it fosters that sense of belonging and well-being. Both individually and collectively.
Exactly. That sense of connection is crucial. For us to thrive socially and emotionally, it allows us to build strong relationships, collaborate effectively, navigate conflict peacefully, and ultimately create a more compassionate and just world.
This deep dive has been such a revelation.
Yeah.
We've delved into the intricate workings of the brain, the impact of early experiences, the complex dynamics of empathy, going way beyond those surface-level social graces.
Totally.
It's clear that social intelligence isn't just a nice-to-have.
Right.
It's essential for our personal well-being, our relationships, and our ability to create a better world.
I couldn't agree more. And it's this ongoing journey. We're all constantly learning and growing.
Right.
But by nurturing our social intelligence, we can become more attuned to ourselves and others, more compassionate, and more deeply connected.
What a powerful message to end on.
Yeah.
So to our listeners out there, remember to embrace curiosity, practice compassion, and never stop learning. This journey of social intelligence is a lifelong adventure.
Totally.
And one that's well worth taking.
Right.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.